Hi, Louise again from Opal People Solutions. Today we're going to talk about policies and procedures, and I have Michelle back again with her list of questions.
Thank you so much for having me, Louise. It's brilliant just to get the opportunity to have a chat around policies and procedures. So really, I suppose the biggest question I have is, you talked about contracts of employment being a legal requirement. Are policies and procedures or an employee handbook, is that a legal requirement for employers?
Not to the same degree, Michelle. A disciplinary procedure is a legislative requirement, but other than that, or a health and safety policy, after you've got 5 employees or more, would be a legal requirement. But for small employers, no, not necessarily.
Okay, and in terms of, I suppose, size of a business, say, for example, I have 10 employees, what do I really need to include? Are there certain policies? Are there certain procedures? Do I need a fully comprehensive employee handbook, or can I just have standalone policies?
It all depends on what your requirements are. There are some basic policies that I would recommend all employers have. And sometimes I take the view that you're better off having a policy from the start as opposed to needing it at some stage in the future. So, for example, in the case of a disciplinary policy, if an employee commits an act of gross misconduct, for example, they post something inappropriate on social media, it's very hard for you to deal with that as a corrective action in the same way that with your own child, unless they understood the behavioural parameters within which they operate, it's very hard for you to take corrective action for a child. And the same applies to an employee that, if they couldn't reasonably be expected to know that this was wrong, it is quite hard to deal with that as a disciplinary offence.
Okay, brilliant. And in terms of who and when these need to be given out, is there certain people within the business or is it everyone? And when would you expect to give these to your employees?
You've obviously 2 sets of employees within any organisation. You have managers who are employees, and you have the remainder of your workforce. So I would argue if you've got a policy, it should be issued to all employees. And I suppose in days gone by, without showing my age, we would have very much produced an employee handbook, got it typeset and stapled, and it was probably out of date as soon as we were issuing it, or there was another policy that we thought we should have included. Nowadays, there are so many ways of issuing policies to employees, whether that be through a server and an intranet within your own organisation, or whether you use some form of HR software where you can upload those policies and procedures. But if you have a policy, you should make sure it is issued. From a manager's perspective, it is important that they understand the policy. Not every employee, being realistic, is going to read every single policy that you send to them, but your obligation is to make them aware and to make that visible for them. But a manager should be trained in the policy. So, for example, if you have a bullying and harassment policy, the manager should know what their obligations and responsibilities are under that policy.
So, just like contracts of employment, should the policies or the employee handbook be reviewed or updated regularly?
Probably a wee bit more difficult for me to answer that one, Michelle, because as I said, there is no legislative requirement that you issue, with the exception of health and safety and with the exception of disciplinary procedures. There's no legal requirement for you to issue such documents. However, if we will certainly work with you and recommend a suite of policies and procedures. So there's a whole host of family-friendly legislation, maternity leave, paternity leave, parental leave, adoption leave, and those do follow on from legislation. So, for example, if government enhanced maternity provisions, you would need to update your policy and procedure in light of that. But a lot of other policies are in case something happens or in case you need to reference it. So whilst we can't always cover every single eventuality, there may be a situation that happens in your organisation where we have to write a bespoke policy or procedure for you specifically, and we can turn around that fairly quickly.
So, in terms of Opal People Solutions and the services you offer, you can start from scratch when a business has nothing,
Yeah.
right through to updating and helping support. Obviously, there's different parameters and things that you need to do within that, but you're able to offer all those services.
Absolutely. And as with contracts of employment, they tend to go hand in hand. So when a client contacts us and they want contracts of employment, they generally speaking will ask for a company handbook as well. For our retained clients, under that arrangement, we carry out a HR health check as a matter of course with those employers, and we determine what the gaps are between what they currently have and what they require, and we provide that from the very start of that relationship.